After studying the definition of quality of experience and the evolution of this concept, starting from quality of service, it's good to start talking about how quality of experience is modeled and how quality of experience is measured. So, in this part of the unit, we are going to study models and methods to evaluate quality of experience. When talking about how to measure quality of experience, we need to look at the different methods or the different approaches to understand the impact of the network performance and the related aspects over the user perception. In this case, we can look at two different ways. One way that it's mainly focused on evaluation of the network management system, so evaluating different network parameters or quality of service parameters, and then try to reflect or extrapolate the result of over the user of the modification of the parameters, network parameters. On the other hand, if we look at the second approach, looking at the service level performance measurement, the idea in this case is to dig a bit more into what's the user opinion and try to create the statistical samples or take statistical samples about the user's response on the different aspects related to the telecommunication service or the provision of a telecommunication service. But as we have seen in the previous presentation, the evaluation of quality of experience is not only depending on the understanding of the network parameters. It's not only depending on quality of service evaluation. We need to look at the combination of the network parameters with those elements, like for example the background of the people, like for example the level of income, like for example the level of interest on a service. We need to combine all these elements and trying to understand or trying to reflect what will be the user response before a service, before an application, or before the interaction with a telecommunications infrastructure. So in this case, we have developed different methods and different alternatives to evaluate quality of experience, to assess quality of experience, considering two different approaches. One that is a pure subjective approach. Basically, the idea in this case is to ask directly the user what's their opinion or what's his or her opinion regarding the service, and asking them to give a grade from 1 to 5 or given a number from 1 to 10 about their perception regarding a service or an application. In this case, this is the mean opinion score system. So basically, a user interacts with an application, uses the services, or uses an infrastructure, and after all, we ask the user, okay, what's your opinion? What would you grade? How would you grade this service, or this application, or this infrastructure? On the other hand, there has been developed a system based on objective measurements. In this case, the idea is via software, via the development of different algorithms, to interpret or to predict what would be the answer of a user by collecting some basic statistic, basic numbers, especially network performance indicators, create a model, and based on the analysis of these numbers and the analysis of these samples, create the number that will predict what will be the answer or the response of a user regarding a service. Like for example, okay, a user is watching Netflix. We analyze the network performance while this user is watching Netflix, and by analyzing the statistics of the network performance, we get the number the user will provide to evaluate the service. We don't ask the user, okay, what's your opinion about this Netflix transmission? We don't ask them. We basically, based on the numbers and the analysis of the network parameters, we create a model and we can predict what will be the answer with this specific service. And in this case, different methods or different technologies have been developed. One of them is the Media Delivery Index. The other one is the perceptual evaluation of speech quality and the video quality measurement. And in the next slides, I'm going to explain each one of these methods presented in this part of the presentation. Let's start with the subjective method. So basically, the subjective method, the mean opinion score, provides a numerical indication of the perceived quality of received media after compression or after a transmission. Basically, what we are doing here is giving a grade to the service. We are evaluating as users the service using different scales, 1 to 5, or one from bad to excellent, or one with from very annoying to imperceptible. And we can use this scale with different types of questions. Let's say we can use this scale to evaluate the overall perception or the overall response regarding a service or an application, but we can also use this scale to ask for specific details within this, let's say, test. For example, in general terms, let's go back to the example of Netflix. The user watches the series, and after watching one of these chapters, we ask the user what's her opinion regarding the service, the overall perception. But at the same time, we can ask, what's your opinion regarding the chapter, this specific chapter? We can also ask about the definition of the movie or the chapter or the series. If they think that this is a good or bad resolution, we can also ask about that. And try to identify different aspects where we will prepare some specific questions and ask the user to grade these different aspects. The idea in this case is that it's a pure subjective method, so all the opinions and the grades depends on the personal biases and the memory effect. What it means that depending on background, depending on age, depending on, for example, your skills, depending also on your knowledge of the technology, the answers can be different. Let's say, for example, if I'm talking about the evaluation of a service, and I'm asking, for example, my dad or my mom, who are in their 60s, probably they are not so picky about quality or about the quality of the image or the sound or the colors or the bright in the image. But if, on the other hand, I ask a person to evaluate the same service, let's say Netflix service, and this person is a professional guy with undergraduate or graduate education, with some experience and knowledge on technology, and let's say the guy is a geek in general terms, the evaluation could be different. The same service, probably the same chapter in the same series will be evaluated in different ways because of these aspects, these personal biases that will affect the general evaluation. For some experts, these biases can impact in a negative way the evaluation of services and applications. So they propose the development of more objective methods to measure the quality of experience. In this case, they have proposed methods like MDI or PSQ, where they want to create models that can predict the answer of the user without asking him. So in this case, it is a set of measures that can be used to monitor both the quality of a delivered video stream by providing an accurate measurement of delay and packet loss at network level. So this is the way that MDI works. So basically what we are doing is looking at the network level parameters. Usually these objective methods look at these technical parameters because they are quantifiable. And for example, they compare what's the amount of, let's say in a video transmission, what's the amount of received bytes minus the number of, let's say, lost bytes. And by calculating this differential, this delay factor, they can also calculate how much of the content, how much of the information has been lost. And based on this predict, okay, if based, for example, in percentages, if 10%, they can say, like, for example, if the loss or the delay factor is between 0 to 10% or between 10 to 20% or between 30% to 40%, we are going to assign a grade. 0 to 10%, okay, probably the user will answer, the service is excellent, let's give it 5. If it's in the other range, 10 to 20, okay, probably the user will answer 4, it's good, and so forth. There is another measurement that can be taken into account when talking about using the MDI system, and it's create this or use this media loss rate. Basically, it's comparing the packets expected and the packets received in a certain interval of time. Let's say I'm broadcasting or I'm streaming something. I know that this stream will use X amount of, let's say 10 IP packets, and out of these 10 packets, IP packets, the receiver just got, let's say 5 in 1 second. So the media loss rate will be 5 packets per second. What we can say later is, based on the analysis of this rate, we can look at the models, different tables, and say, okay, with this media loss rate of 5 packets per second, the user response, the equivalent in terms of a grade from 1 to 5 will be 1 or 2 or 5 or 4.5. The model is created based on these previous calculations, and as I mentioned, it tries to create a prediction of the final user response. Within the objective methods, we have a special category. Let's call it in this way. A special category in the sense that it doesn't look at, let's say, in real time, what's the difference between what we are sending and what we are receiving to evaluate the quality of experience. In this case, these methods, PSQ and the next one, BQM, are based on, first, subjective measurements. So they run tests with hundreds of users, varying different parameters, varying volume, varying resolutions, varying delays, varying jitters, and created a huge database with collected data. And to create these evaluations, or to create this amount of data, they used some reference cases. Based on these experiments, they developed quality of experience curves, quality of experience models that will predict what will be the answer of a user if the jitter is X, the delay is Y, and let's say the packet loss is Z. Based on this combination of factors, the answer will be 4, or will be 3, or will be a 5, or will be 4.5. But in this case, the first step to create the models was to interview real users, modify parameters, collect the answers, and based on that, they created a huge database. They created also software that later on will basically take some specific content, let's say voice in the case of PSQ, or video in the case of VQM, and evaluate these services, and will generate the grading scale. So let's call them subjective test-based methods, but objective oriented. So in this case, PSQ, for example, it's automated. It's a method automated only for speech quality. This is not used for video. This is not used for multimedia content. It's only used to evaluate the quality of the voice, the speech quality in telephony systems. It was standardized by the ITU-T in the recommendation P.862, and as I mentioned before, was developed to model subjective tests using the mean opinion score. So they created this method based on a lot of interviews and tests done before. And what they are doing is they are using this method. We use voice samples as test signals, and based on these voice samples, we evaluate what's for example, the problem with this voice sample, what parameters have been changed, and based on this modification and looking at the database, we can assure that, okay, the most grading scale, or the user will grade this with a 4, with a 5, with a 3. There is one issue that it's not considered by PSQ, and it's the loss of volume. So the system as it is right now cannot differentiate if we are working with a high or a low volume sample. This is the only thing that cannot be measured. But rest of variables, like for example the speed of the voice, the jitter, the delay, those aspects can be evaluated by PSQ and generate a number that at the end will be a reference for the evaluation of the quality of experience. In the same line of these subjective methods based approaches with an objective approach, or methods with an objective approach, we can find VQM that different to PSQ. It's used to evaluate voice and video and try to express these scores or these grades in mean opinion score scale. So basically what we are doing with VQM and the VQM based tools is to evaluate multimedia content, let's say video, in different formats like MPEG-4, AVC, or MPEG-2, these encoding formats. This is a software that will take a video sample, and this software will look at the statistics and the collected information previously stored by running this subjective test, and will provide a score, will provide us a number. These scores are highly correlated with human concepts, with human judgments collected during subjective quality assessment tests in normalized conditions. So, similar to PSQ, the creators of these methods interviewed or ran hundreds, thousands of tests, varying the conditions in the video, varying the resolution, varying the data rate, varying the contrast, light, and created a model. Okay, by combining these different factors, the user response, or the user judgment, or the user score will be 4 or 5 or 3 or 2. So this is the way it works. We take a sample, we use a software, and based on the use of this software, the software will evaluate different aspects, will contrast this information with its database, and will provide us a number that will give us an interpretation of what's the quality of experience of the user. In summary, what we can see in this case is that we can contrast what are the, let's say, good and bad sides of using subjective methods and objective methods. In this table, I'm trying to compare these methods and trying to give some hints about what they are and when to use them. So subjective methods will require the user's input in the evaluation process. So we need to deal with real users, interview real users, and ask them about their opinion regarding the service. In contrast with objective methods, we do not require users' input, but they are often based on well-validated data derived from subjective evaluations. I mentioned before that. So even though that we don't interview users, we, by using PSQ or by using VQM, these methods, we are taking advantage of a huge database with information previously collected that will predict what it's going to be the quality of experience, scale or grade provided by the user. In the subjective methods, the users can indicate their feelings in a survey and will try to give a numeric expression of subjective quality. During the subjective method, we can also ask not only for the grade of, okay, how you grade the service or how you evaluate the service. We can also ask why. And we can also try to understand more about the user background. What are the reasons behind this user opinion? In the objective method, instead, we rely on passive monitoring of the application or the service or the user, but the user behavior is not, let's say, explained or is not asked for. So we don't care about this user behavior, what's behind the user evaluation. In the subjective methods, considering the fact that people's feelings are subject to various effects like personal biases, the memory effect, it's not always easy to obtain reliable evaluation results. It's a trade-off. Because we can, by running subjective methods, we can understand what is the grade, but also why the user is providing this grade. Why the user didn't like or like a service or an application. We can understand that. But we need to be really careful about the reasons, because in some cases people are just really angry at, let's say, the company. They are biased. If we are evaluating a service like, I don't know, Claro, or the service provided by Telefonica, we can probably interview people who are working for a competitor, and probably because of that reason he or she doesn't want to give a good grade to the service provided by Claro or by Movistar. Things like that can affect the evaluation. But so in order to prepare this kind of evaluation, this assessment, we need to be really careful and work a lot on the planning of the evaluation. On the other hand, the objective methods, they cannot assess all the quality of experience dimensions. If you look at how the systems have been created, they only look at quality of service and they only look at network performance parameters. So in some way, these methods only provide a half view, a partial view of what's the user opinion. And it's important to have the overall picture. And when we talk about subjective methods, it's important to see that the test could be very costly to perform and will require a lot of effort in order to, let's say, to run it in a professional and, let's say, statistically valid result or a statistically valid way. And it's important to consider the sample size, Because if we run with a very large scale tests or number of tests, probably it will consume a lot of time. If we are asking thousands of users, this will require an effort. So it's a bit complicated. One can say, okay, that just by interviewing 15 users is okay. It's okay probably if you're just running a small test in a small scale. But if it's a company like Movistar trying to evaluate its service, probably they need to ask big sample to understand what's the user's quality of experience, and that will require effort and time. And because of this, it's a bit difficult to run this type of test in real time because it's time consuming. On the other hand, the objective methods can help in lowering the cost of quality assessment. But there is a problem that in some cases the correlation between what we collected or the samples we are using to fit the system cannot be enough, can be low in terms of numbers to offer a good correlation with the subjective with the subjective or the numbers, the objective numbers provided by the application. And especially if we are talking about network parameters. So the more network parameters, the more samples of network parameters we can collect, the more information in terms of network parameters we can collect, the more accurate will be the prediction of these systems in terms of, okay, this is the quality of experience perceived by our users. So when developing this type of studies, you need to look at the different pros and cons. But if you ask me, personally speaking, I would say that I would prefer the subjective methods because they can provide me with more detail, more relevant information, not only the pure technical data collected by looking at the network parameters. But how these methods, either subjective or objective methods, are used, let's say, in real scenarios? That's a good question, and the homework that I'm proposing for you is trying to offer an answer to this question. So what I'm going to propose, or what I'm proposing in this case, is that you look for cases. You can go to different publications, papers, IEEE papers, studies, online studies, where a quality of experience assessment has been done. So look for cases where a quality of experience evaluation has been done. Can be a study on quality of experience for video, for audio. It could be academic, it could be related or let's say presented in a paper in the IEEE or an online paper. You can look for different examples. You are free to choose the case, the method devised to measure and evaluate the quality of experience. I can provide you a couple of examples, and I will provide you a couple of examples in the web page, but don't use them. You can just look at these examples, these cases, and try to look for similar cases and prepare a presentation based on this methodology. So explain what they did in this case, how they did it, and if they did it using a subjective or objective methods. And prepare a presentation of no more than 10 minutes, maximum 7 slides. Of course, you can record the presentation and prepare this in groups of maximum 2 people, or you can also work individually. Besides the slides, write a document with the summary of your work, and no more than 1 page. It's just a summary explaining, okay, what was the methodology or the method you described. And please upload your presentation and the document in a separate way, following the instructions provided in the webpage. That's it.